Whether you're a data engineer, a data scientist, or casual data analyst, chances are you've needed to import data from a web API before, most likely in JSON format, and convert them into tables. You've probably used tools like Python to be able to do that. However, you still need to code to be able to use a language like Python. And I found a way that you can unpack your JSON data into a Power BI data model without having to write any code. In this video, I'll be using the Fantasy Premier League APIs as an example. This year, Fantasy Premier League has reached 11 million players, and more people are using data to try and get an edge in their FPL gameplay. This video won't help you to become a better FPL player, but it'll definitely help you to become a better data user. Let's get into it. The links to Power BI Desktop and the APIs are in the description, so you can just get that off there. For the purpose of this specific video, I'm just going to be using the first two links, which is to get your static data and then to get your game week statistics. If you want to do analysis on your game week selections and your transfers, or even if you want to do analysis on your mini leagues, then you can use the rest of the APIs on here. Before we get to importing though, I just want to show you what the end result is going to be and what your data model is going to look like once your imports are done. So once we're done with the data import, this is what your data model is going to look like. And in data modeling terms, we'll call it your dimension and your fact table. So your dimension tables will be all your static data, which is your game weeks, positions, and your teams. That there doesn't really have any statistical data in it. It just has your static data, which describes what's in your which describes your statistical data. And then the big one is your player statistics, which is your fact table, and that there has all of your player stats in it broken down by game week. And once you have that over there, we'll have to create relationships between all of these different queries or different entities. And once you've done that over there, you'll be able to start doing your analysis. So let's get into the import process. This is what the Power BI desktop interface looks like, and there's a few default options over here, but we're going to use a web data source. So if you click the get data option on your ribbon, there's here the web data source, and we're just going to select that over there. And once it opens up, I'm just going to paste in the URL for the static data and just click OK. And once this opens up, it's going to open up the Power Query Editor. Okay, so the Power Query Editor actually also exists in Excel as well. It looks almost exactly the same as well, but Power BI handles the scale and the efficiency of working with a little bit more data much more efficiently than Excel. Now, once this opens up, just going to wait for it does take some time depending on how fast your PC is, but I'm just going to click on the refresh option here so that it can update because I have done this before. It's actually cached in some options for me. But now what's it actually done over here now, it's opened up it's tried to expand the columns in the it's so Power BI has tried to be a little bit clever here and try to expand or open up the API for me, which I didn't actually need. So on the right hand side over here, there's an applied steps section. I'm just going to remove a few of the steps that Power BI has tried to preempt, and I'm going to keep just the first one, which is the source. Now, what this shows us in this specific API, these are the lists or the sets of data that you can find in this API. So the ones that we're going to be focused on is the events, which is actually our game weeks, the teams, and the element types, which is the positions, and then also the elements, which is the actual players. Right. So let's start off with the game weeks. So I'm going to click on the list option next to the events column, and you'll see it's giving me 38 rows, which is actually 38 game weeks. But as you can see, this still doesn't make sense because it just has the word record in it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is on your top left hand side of your screen, you will see there's a to table option. Once you click on that over there, you'll see it will now it will ask us to select a delimiter. In this case, I'm just using the defaults because this is a clean set of data, and just going to click OK. And you'll see now it's now turned this column here into a table that we can expand. And now you can see that once we click on that option over there to expand, it's giving us the list of columns within the specific data set, or within this specific list. I'm just going to untick the option here of use original column name as prefix and select OK. So for now, I'm just going to expand all columns within this specific list. And here you can see that we have our ID, which is unique, and you have your game week name, which is game week 1 to game week 38. And then it shows you things like deadlines and so on, which we're really not that interested in. So to remove the columns that we don't like, on the right hand side over here under your applied step section, under the expand column 1 option, you can just click on the icon next to the step, and you can just deselect the columns that you don't want. So in this case, I'm just going to deselect all of them, and I just want the ID and the name column. And once I click OK, now it's just giving me the 2 columns that I want. The next thing I'm going to do is this ID column, I'm actually going to convert it to text. This is an important step because when we need to join into other tables, some of those columns might be in text as well. In a standardized version, you'll actually want to do it as integers, but we may need to pass these values into URLs, and URLs require text, so we're going to just keep it as text. So you right click on the column, and you go to the change type option and select text, and there we go. And now you'll see it's all been converted to text. Now you've actually just imported your first set of data from the API, and we'll just call that, change the name of that from query 1 to Gameweeks. That's it, and there we go, we're done. So you've got your first set of data, or your first fact table in your Power BI data model. So now we're going to do the player positions. So because we've already used this URL already, instead of having to go through the process of selecting the get data option, on the top here on the ribbon under recent data sources, you'll see we've got our static API URL there. So I'm just going to select that again, and it's going to do the same process of creating a query for me, which will come up now. And then you see it's created another query called query 1. Again, I'm just going to do the same thing, just remove the steps that I don't want. I wonder why Power BI is doing that, but anyway, let's choose the player position, which is element types. I'm just going to click the list link next to the element types option, and now you'll see it's given us our 4 records within that list. Then I'm going to select the 2 table option again, click OK, and here we go, option to expand it. Now it's remembered the fact that I unticked the use original column name as prefix earlier. It's remembered it, so that's good. I'm just gonna choose all columns for now, and then you'll see it's given me a whole lot of columns over here. Again, I'm not interested in keeping all of these, so I just want to keep all of the columns up to singular name short, and then so again, under the applied step section, just select the icon next to expand column 1, untick everything, and just select ID, plural name short, singular name, and singular name short. So, well, obviously, if you don't want to select all of these columns, it's fine. You maybe just want one of these columns. That's completely fine as well. So I'll change that query name to positions. There we go. That's done. And then just change this ID column to text. There we go. And then the next one we're going to do is the teams. So same process again, because it's all this data sitting in the same API. And just wait for it to open. Remove the steps that I don't want again. and select the teams option. Convert that to a table. Let's expand that. And then again, you can see there's a whole lot of columns here that we're not really interested in. So I'm just going to remove some of these here, and so just untick that over there. In this case, it's a little bit different. I want the code column, I want the ID column, and I want the short name and the name. So that's it. That's all the columns I'm going to keep from this specific list. And then lastly, I'll just convert the code and the ID into text, right? And then let's call that teams. And then the last set of data that I want from this API is our player details. So this is just the names of the players, the team that they play for, the positions that they play for, and so on. But we'll link it all back up later to the other data sets. So now again, remove the steps that I don't want. And next to the elements, click the list option. And now it's going to give us our players. Convert that to a table. Click OK, and then we're just going to expand that, and you'll see there's a lot of columns over here now. We're going to get rid of a lot of them just now. Okay, so we'll keep all of them for now. So once you open it up, you can see that a lot of this data will start to actually look familiar, because you would have seen it on the FPL website itself if you are playing FPL regularly. And so you'll see things like chance of playing next round, etc. So if it's 75, then you know the player will be flagged on the website, etc. But again, we don't really need that data for what we're trying to do over here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to again remove a lot of these columns. So I want to keep the code, I want to keep the ID, first name, second name. I'll keep the team code, and web name. So the web name is how it appears on the website itself. And just to confirm if there's anything else that I need, and says no, that's all. I'm just going to keep those for now. So you'll see there are some stats in here, but I'm not going to use that because, like I said, it's not broken down by Gameweek, so it's not of any use to us, at least not for now. Okay, so just click that over there, and here we go. Now we have a list of all of our players, all the names, the player. And there's one thing that I forgot to actually add over here, is the player's position, which is actually called element type, which once have, let's just search for it. Yes, it's element type. Now it's only selected element type, so I'm just going to go back there and choose code, ID, first name, second name, team code, and web name. Okay, so there we have it. We've got our code, we've got our element type, we've got your first name and your ID and the teams. And that's more or less what we need from this API for this specific exercise. So I'm just going to call that player details. There we go. And I'm going to convert the code, element type, ID, team, and team code all to text. Okay, there we have it. So we've now done the first step, which is import all of our static data. So the next step over here is to now get our Gameweek statistics. So on the new source option in the Power Query editor, we're going to select the web option again. And once that opens up, I'm just going to paste in the URL for our Gameweek statistics. Now, what's different over here is that you'll see at the end, there's a number over here 283, which is actually the ID for the player. So this is going to give us the data for one player, which in this case 283 is Mo Salah's data. Now the reason why they do that is obviously you can't go and retrieve. This is a web API, so if you have to try and retrieve every single player's data at once, you'll probably kill FPL servers. So you have to retrieve one player's data at a time. But there's good news. We're going to create a function which is going to loop through every single player in the data in the database. It's going to pass that value into the URL, and then we're going to be able to retrieve all of the players' data at once and load that into our Power BI model. But before we get to that, we need to do a few things first, and we're going to start off by removing the steps that Power BI preempted again, and we're going to bring through the data from the history list, which is going to give us our Gameweek statistics. And if I convert that to table again, I'm just going to expand that over there, and now you can see that it's given me the data for, let me just refresh the preview over there, because I think there's been more than 19 game weeks so far. But yes, it's given me all my data there now. And if I scroll to the right, I can see that there's a whole lot of columns here that we're going to need. Now, one thing that's quite interesting over here is that I didn't know that the FPL API had expected data. At least it wasn't in here when I first started using this API. So as I'm scrolling now, it's come as an unexpected surprise. So it will be nice to be able to verify this data. So if any of you watching this video can have a look at this expected data and tell us how accurate this is, that would be much appreciated. But let's get back to the exercise of importing this over here. So now I'm just going to remove some of the columns that we don't need over here as usual. So I'm going to unselect the columns or deselect the columns to start off with. I'm going to keep the element column because that has that value of 283 that we're going to pass into the URL for the API just now. And I'm not interested in things like fixtures and opponents and so on. But what I do want over here now is I want to see the total points. I want to see the round, which is actually the game week. I want minutes, goals scored, assists, clean sheets, goals conceded, own goals. So you can see all of the statistical columns is obviously valuable to us. I'll keep bonus. I'm not going to keep BPS now, I suppose, but well, there's no harm in putting it in there if we do want to use it. But I'm definitely not going to retain influence, creativity, threat, etc. And then let's put in those expected columns in there as well. And I'd like to keep value because it'll be nice to be able to track a player's value in there as well, especially if you want to pass this into a solver and so on. Then you'll need the player's value, and then the rest of it, things like how many transfers was made in a game week and so on, that I'm not interested in at the moment. So I'm just going to click OK over here, and then now you'll see I've got the columns that I need. So again, I'm going to do some housekeeping here of changing data type. So on the element and the round column, I'm just going to change that to text. Okay, and then this is very important because if you don't do it, you won't be able to aggregate on these columns because you cannot aggregate text. Of course, it will just count it. Your total points, minutes, goals scored, assists, clean sheets. So all of the columns that you'll need to aggregate at some point, so all of your statistics, you'll need to change that to a number. So right now, by default, as you can see, it has these data type. It's either mixed, so it could be text, it could be numbers, but we're forcing it to say, look, it is definitely numbers. Okay, so BPS, I'm just going to leave those ones there for now, the expected data, because it's actually decimals, and I'll show you how to handle that just now. And the value as well, you can see it doesn't make sense at the moment, so I'm just going to park that one aside for now, and I'm going to change the data types over here for my stats to numbers, and I can do whole numbers here. That's perfectly fine. And there we go. So now we've got our number columns for those specific on each for our stats. Right now, what's in remember, somewhere, if you've used Excel, of course you'll know that a dot isn't seen as a decimal. You need to use commas, and so we need to do some changes over here. So what we're going to do is, on these expected goals columns, we're just going to highlight all of them, and we're going to use the under the transform section, we're going to select the replace values option, and we're going to replace our dots with commas, and just click OK. And there you have it. Now, as you can see here, it's done that for us, and now we can actually change the type of that there to a, you can change it to a decimal, and there you have it. Now you have your expected data in the format that you need. Like, if you don't change those dots or full stops to a comma first, the data type conversion will fail. Okay, and then this one here, for the value, as you can see, it's 130. Now we know that Salah started off with a value of 13 million. He's now 12.8, but for some reason the API does not bring through those decimals over there, which is fine. What we can do over here is we'll first convert that to a number. A whole number is fine, and then we're going to add a column, a custom column. Let's call it player value, and we'll select the value option and divide that by 10, and there we go. Now it's just a workaround to be able to go and use what we have, instead of having to try and update this column here specifically. I just made our lives much easier by just deriving a column from that over there and doing a calculation, and we can use this now as our Gameweek player value. So now we've done with all our data transforms. The next part is to create the function that is going to loop through the URL for the player stats for every single player in the FPL database. So let's just call this query 1, and we'll call it EW stats for game week stats. Okay. Now, once we've done that over there, we need to we need to create a function that's going to do the looping. So on the GW stats query, if you right click on it, there's an advanced editor option. If you click on the advanced editor, all you can see, it's basically doing whatever you were seeing in the front end just now. It's telling you that, okay, you first went and you got your source, you put in your source, which was this API URL over here. You selected history as your list, and then this is all of the work that you've done on it so far. So you changed some data types, you added a new column, and you divided the player value or the value by 10 to get your player value, etc. And that's it. There's nothing more to this over here. It's just showing you all of your steps. Now, I've done this before, of course, so I have it saved, so I'm not going to retype all of it. But to convert this into a function is very easy. I'm just going to show you how to do it over here. So we're going to call this function load player stats, and I'm just gonna add this over here. So we're just gonna make a space in at the top of the editor and add this line over here called let's load player stats, which is the name of our function, and we're going to pass a parameter or variable, in this case called element ID. And here we go, it's a text type, because remember, now we're doing concatenations into the URL, or we're going to join this value into the URL. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to edit our URL. Now the new URL is going to look something like this over here. So you see, similar to the one that was already there originally, but we're adding a little bit to it over here, to say instead of putting in the value of 283, which is hard coded, it's going to pass this element ID into here, and we can just remove the original one that we had in there. And then the last part, just to end the function, is just like this over here. And just for the sake of neatness, we'll just indent that over there. So there we have it. We've actually now taken the step, and we've taken our query and we've converted it into a function. Okay, and this is probably the most, if you want to call this coding, then fair enough. I know that I said this is a no code video, which I kind of stand by, but this is about as much coding use as you're going to do throughout this whole process. Okay, and now we click the done option, and there we have it. Now you see it's changed our query to a function, and now it will allow us to put in the element ID that we need. Now the next step to do is we have to call this function. And where are we going to do that? We're going to do that inside the player details query, which we created earlier, which has all our static player details. So in here, we're going to select at the top over here to invoke a custom function. And under here, we can leave the new column name as custom. That's not a problem. And under function query, we're going to call the GW stats. And now it's telling us, okay, well, what do we want to do over here? So under element ID, we're saying that we're going to pass a column name to it, and we're going to actually pass through the ID column, as in this specific ID over here, from our player details table into, and we're going to push that into our function and click OK. And we just select continue over here, but the whole data policy. And again, I'm just gonna ignore the privacy levels and select save. And now it's actually starting to load my data into it's trying to join up my player details into the Gameweek stats, and it's going to create one expanded view for me. Now if we look at it, because it's a because there's so much of data, it's just pulled through about 1,000 records over here to preview. And now look at what it's done. It's added a new column with the GW stats, so it's joined up the Gameweek stats with our player details. Now there is actually a red line over here which is telling us there's actually errors within this data. I'm not going to bother myself too much with that over there by trying to look for the errors. If you right click on this column, I'm just going to select the option which says remove errors. So if there's any dirty data in there, I'm not interested in seeing it. And now I'm going to expand this column over here. And now watch what it does over here. It's going to show me all the columns that are available to me, which is coming from my GW stats. I'm just going to load all of them because we've already selected which columns we want previously when we imported our GW stats. And now if I scroll, now you would have already seen something different over here. You can see Cedric Suarez's name appear 18 or 19 times over there, and for each round from round 1 till round 20, or from game week 1 to game week 20, we have this player's data in here. And now we're cooking with gas over here. The one thing that I noticed over here though is that even though we updated our data types previously when importing the GW stats, after expanding the columns, it's kind of thrown that away, which is quite annoying. So if anybody from Microsoft sees this, please sort this out, because I don't know why it has to be this way. But let's just go and update these again. So specifically the ones that we're going to do aggregations on. So we'll do our minutes, goal scored, assists, clean sheets. So we're just going to highlight all of these columns here. Own goals, penalties, saves. So all of our statistical columns, and we'll change that to whole number. and then our expected columns, we'll just change that to decimal numbers. And then lastly, well, this one is taking a little bit longer to load. And then the last one that we'll do is obviously our player value again, which is a type decimal number. Okay, so that's just one thing to look out for, but not a major train smash, easy to work around over here. And now, once we've done all of that over there, we need to load this data into our data model, and you click on the close and apply option. One more thing that we need to do before we can get into actually seeing these numbers is to just create relationships between the specific entities. Now, on your left hand side over here, you'll see there's the option to go and drag to create your charts, but the last option over here is your model option, where it shows you the relationships between the various data sets or queries that we imported. Now, earlier in the video, I showed you how the data model would look like, but again, Power BI has tried to preempt what we're trying to do over here, and it's got our relationships in the model incorrect. So I'm just going to clear out. There is no relationships between game weeks, positions, and teams. Everything links to our player details, um, table. So I'm just going to delete that one over there. Yes, I want that out. And I want to delete this one here as well. And so let's have a look to see what relationship it's created over here. So on the game weeks column, this is incorrect as well. So we're actually going to be joining out the ID of the game week to the round column, because that's a game week round, and it is a many to one relationship. So that's fine. We're going to keep that one over there. And then the next one we're going to do is for the player positions. We're just going to join up the element type to the ID column over here. And once we do that over there, we can, again, you can see then there's it's showing you what we've done over here. So we're joining up the element type to ID. We know it's a one to many, or it's one player detail. There's many records in the player details table to one record in the position. That's perfect. And then the last one that we're going to do is the team IDs. If we go here to under the team, we're going to join the team to the team ID. And again, we know it's a many to one relationship, and now it's an active relationship. So there we have it. Now we're just going to click apply so that we can make sure, so that we can confirm these relationship changes in the model. And then once we've done that over there, it's now going to create the relationships between the data and load this data into our data model. So especially if you're doing this for the first time, it will take a little bit, because we are bringing through quite a little bit of data over here. But you'll see once it's done, it's very, very fast, because the data is sitting locally on your machine, so you have no issues over here. So now so there you have it. You've got all your one to many or many to one relationships, and let's go and put this to the test. So on our Power BI canvas, now we'll have our data sets over here. And what we're going to do is, just to make sure that our data is in there, it's loaded in the model, and we can start doing some analysis on it, I'm going to create a matrix. So I'm going to click on the matrix option under my visualizations, and I'm going to select for my values, I'll just tick the goal scored, the assists, and let's do as just to see what it looks like, our expected goals and expected assists. Now once I've done that over there, I can just expand the matrix over there so we can see more of it. And then under the rows section, I just want to go to the under player details. I just select the web name and add that to my rows, and now you can see that it's broken down by player. You can see the number of goals, and so if I hover my mouse over the sum of goals scored, I can just click on it and sort it in descending order, and then you can see from highest to lowest. You can see Haaland is at the top of the scoring charts at the moment. We can see um, his expected details as well, and then after this over here, you can also, if you want to say maybe do split this by game week, then under the columns you can just choose the name and drag the game week name to your columns, and now we can see, okay, per game week. Well, obviously this doesn't really make sense, but let's say we move this, take out some of these other values over here. Now we can see the the player name and then goals per game week. I'm just showing it this to you as an example, but the purpose of this is largely to show you that the data is there. It's split up by game week. You can see the player's name, and now you have your data that's ready to use, and you can start doing your analysis on the FPL APIs. So if you want to download data from other sources, from other websites into, I know like people like to use StatsBomb and FBref and so on, or Opta, or whatever it may be, you can actually choose any other type of data, create some type of lookup column that can identify that, Haaland in this data set versus Haaland in another data set that may have accents or so on is the same record, is the same player. And you can join in other statistical data that the FPL APIs may not have, and you can store it in your Power BI model. And just one more bonus tip that I can show you as well is that on this over here, on your matrix, under the more options section here at the bottom, you can actually export this data to a CSV or something like that over there. If you want to be able to put this data somewhere, use this data elsewhere, you can actually export it out of Power BI and ingest that data elsewhere. So if this makes it easy for you to be able to convert your JSON to text, and you want to use that text elsewhere, then you can do so as well. And that's it. You've now officially imported the FPL data into your Power BI model, and you've done some analysis on it over here by following the instructions in this video. And all the best with your analysis. Cheers, everyone.